Well, for me, it's any chance to get down to the boat, crack on with a few jobs, bit of maintenance. Welcome to It's a Boat Thing, Not So Technical. So we've got a few jobs to do on the boat today. Let's get on board, get stuck into them. The first job that we're going to tackle is to take to pieces the tap that's in the galley. This is really just to make sure that there's no calcium build-up within the workings and the inner workings of the tap, and just to make sure that we have no blockages. Really just give it a once over, ready for the new season. Pretty straightforward. We're going to take this to pieces here. We're going to need a screwdriver, mainly because it's got a thin end. We're going to need an Allen key. There's a grub screw inside there, so it needs to be the correct size for that. And either a small pair of adjustables or a spanner of the correct size. We'll show you how that works next. The potential problem that you can get is build-up of calcium around this area here, and it's basically where the tap swivels and the body of the tap actually meet. Now underneath this you have the reservoir that's inside, and I'll show you that in a moment, but that is what mixes the water between the hot and the cold to give you the desired temperature. Our first job, well, with any job over the sink, is actually to put the plug in. That just helps us if we drop anything down the sink, it doesn't roll outside the boat down the drainage. Then we just need to pop this little cap off here. It's a little bit tricky, and what that does is that exposes an Allen key bolt just underneath. So inside this, once the cap is off, you're going to use an ordinary long reach Allen key, and there's just a small Allen key screw in there, and that will undo and enable this to come off the top just there. As you can probably see just in here, that's where the grub screw actually is, and that's what you've loosened just to get that off the top. So we'll put that to one side, and that will expose the top of the body of the tap. Now with a little bit of pressure applied here, we can then take off this cover, basically just to make it look nice, and then with your adjustables or with a spanner, if you happen to have one on board of the correct size, you can then, being very careful not to mark anything, undo. I've put a little bit of pressure on this because it is quite tight. Undo that top nut, which will release that internal screw housing, and that in turn gives you the actual mixer body which is inside this housing. Next thing to do is we're just checking in here to make sure there's no build-up of calcium, and around this rubber seal, this blue seal that you can just see there, to make sure that it sits neatly onto the body inside. I'll just move the camera to show you that. Inside here, to make sure that sits nice and square and nice and flush. So once you've checked around this rubber gasket that there's no calcium build-up, because that can give you a problem if it's not seating flush and then leak out the bottom of the housing. But to put it back together, it's literally the reverse of how you took it to pieces. That sort of notches, if you like, and locates in there. You then put the screw housing back on, and I would always do this by hand to start with, to make sure you don't cross thread the screws. Get up reasonably tight with your hand, and then it only needs a small tighten to make sure that's not loose. The cover We then go back on. The top of the tap is a bit tricky. Would locate back on there. Don't forget to do the grub screw up and then put your cover back in, making sure you don't trap your working gloves in it, but also making sure it's the right way around your hot and your cold feed. And that's your tap looked into if you need to repair it, or you just need to check it to make sure there's no calcium build up within it. That was a fairly straightforward job, and it satisfied me that we've looked inside the tap to make sure there's no potential for any leaks and no build up of any calcium, more importantly no blockages within it. Time to crack on with the next job. Last year I showed you very basically where the filter for the intake for the flush of the toilet was located and explained how it would come to pieces, but we never actually took it to pieces to look at the filter. So I'm going to attempt to do that with one hand and film at the same time. So let's get into it. It's worthwhile checking. Anything that comes in on the raw water intake, you could have weeds or small twigs or even the odd bug in there, and that would inhibit the flush of the water through the pump and then through the toilet. But let's look into it, see where it's located first. On our particular boat, it's just over here down this locker. Let's get into it now. So our filter is located just here in this locker. As you can see, just to the side of it on the right is the main pump for the raw water intake. If I zoom in very carefully, you can see that nut on that brass fixing there is what we're actually aiming for. Let's take that off, look inside and see if the filter is blocked or if it's clear. So to undo this, we're going to again need our trusty adjustables, a little bit of kitchen roll to hand, just in case there's any residual water in there, and essentially undoing this brass fixing. It's not done up very tight because it is brass and only needed just nipping up. We will unscrew that. And there's a metal gauze filter. As you can see, a little bit of water coming out there and a little bit of debris just there. So I'll try and rescue that, and we can actually see what we're capturing to show you the point of what we're trying to do. So it's a little bit tricky to see, but just in here there is a build-up of what looks like some weed or some algae that's in there. Let's take the camera a little bit closer. See, you can see that. There we go. So that is precisely what we're trying to get out of the filter to make sure that this intake is kept clear. So we're cleaning that up in a moment. Let's have a look at this first of all. We'll just take this to the sink and have a closer look to make sure that this filter gauze is kept clear. So looking at this, the filter itself doesn't actually look too bad. There's a little bit of build up just on there, but on the whole, as you can see, it's clear. So just to make life a little easier, to double check, the water system on the boat's turned off at the moment, so using a bottle there of clean water. But now that's clean, clear, put that back into the holder, and we'll put this back in the housing that we just took it off. Let's get my finger right in there and give that a good clean through. I can't feel any obstructions in the pipe. So to me, that looks pretty clear. As you can see, there's some debris coming out of it, but on the whole, that is now nice and clear. So we put the filter that we cleaned earlier, just making sure that sits in the housing just like so. The filter that we cleaned earlier goes back into there, and it's a fairly fine thread actually, but as usual we do everything by hand to start with to make sure that we don't cross thread anything and get it reasonably tight. Our adjustables go back on it. Give it a tighten up, not too tight because we don't want to strip the thread, and there we go. Well, I think that was a job well worth doing. I didn't realise actually that filter was quite as jammed up with bits of weed as it was. I'd actually cleaned that out just before we went into the last few weeks of the season last year. So clearly the weed and such like can be sucked into it at any time. Always worth keeping a check on it, make sure it's clear. Right, on to the next job. So it's fairly snug under here to find the water pump, but the main water pump is in our hold and it's at the back of the boat. I'll turn the camera around and you can see exactly what I'm looking at. So this particular filter can be found just before the main water pump for the water system. What we have here is a filter that's inside this clear housing, and we're going to just take that out and have a look to make sure that there's no debris or obstructions in there. There shouldn't be. It's coming from the clean water tank, so I'm not expecting to see anything in there, but it's always worth a check. Now the main water feed on this pipe has been turned off from the tank, so we should be able to open this without any water coming out of it. So first off, we're going to disconnect the pipe that feeds the water pump. Very easy to do with this push fit connector. Now we're going to just move the outside of the pump filter housing, and that unscrews and effectively bayonet fits into it. Let's take that out and have a look inside. Putting the filter back in again and the cap on it, simply the reverse of how we took it to pieces. So it's a bayonet fit in. Make sure it's snug and fitting tight so there's no leaks. Obviously mop up anything that's come out of the pump, and then we put the pipe back on. So that's checked, that job done now. We just mop up a little bit of the residual water and time to get out the hold, I think. So there you have it, a few of the jobs that I wanted to show you that we would do just before we get the boat recommissioned for the new season. We looked at the tap in the kitchen just to show you how that's put together. We had a look at the filter in the toilet intake, and that had a few bits and pieces in it, so that was worth cleaning out. And of course we've looked at the filter on the main clean water system just before the main water pump. Anyway, as usual, if you like what you see, please comment below. We would love to hear from you. The subscribe button is over here in the corner. We'll see you guys next time.